She was hanging from a tree, wrists bloodied, breath shallow. Beneath a sign smeared in red, "White men don't forgive." Under the brutal blaze of a New Mexico sun, a man rode alone. His name was Boone Thatch, a rancher of few words and fewer friends. Dust trailed behind his mare, rising in slow curls, like smoke from a dying fire. His saddle creaked with each step, a steady rhythm against the hush of the desert. All morning he'd been tracking a stray heifer, prints vanishing into cracked earth like ghosts. Boone liked it this way, alone, surrounded by silence so thick it felt like a prayer. No voices, no questions, just wind brushing across dead brush, the distant cry of a hawk, and the occasional groan of leather. Then he heard it, faint, fragile, a sound too soft for the desert, almost like a breath that forgot how to breathe. He stopped. The mare shifted under him. His eyes narrowed. Again it came, a whimper, weak, sharp, like a soul unraveling. Boone dismounted in a single fluid motion. He tied the reins to a gnarled limb and slung his rifle over his back. Moving through the brush and rock, he stepped lightly, boots pressing into the thirsty ground. That's when he saw her. In a clearing framed by old cottonwoods, under the largest tree, a girl hung by her wrists, her body limp, her arms stretched painfully high, her feet barely brushing the earth. Her skin was baked dark by the sun, her long hair tangled and streaked with blood. Her lips were cracked. A trickle of dried crimson ran down her chin. But she was alive. Boone's breath caught. Above her head, a rough wooden sign was nailed to the tree, words painted in thick, angry red. "White men don't forgive." He staggered back, his gut twisting. The air felt different now, thicker, meaner, like something sacred had been defiled. He scanned the ridges, the rocks, nothing. No movement, no sound, just wind in dead leaves, whispering threats. His hand moved to the knife on his belt. He stepped closer. "Christ," he muttered under his breath. "What did they do to you?" The girl stirred, barely. Her head slumped forward, revealing deep rope burns along her wrists. Torn, raw, unforgiving. "You hear me, girl?" Boone asked, voice rough like gravel. No reply, just a flutter of her breath. "I ain't here to hurt you," he said, softer now, more to himself than her. He reached up, touched the rope, old mesquite fiber twisted tight, meant to torture. He hesitated. That sign, it roared at him, as if it knew what he wasn't guilty of, but almost was. The girl moaned, a sound so small it shattered him. Boone whispered through clenched teeth, "I ain't one of them." Then, with a sharp slice of his blade, the rope gave way. She collapsed, but he caught her, warm, burning, light like bones had left her body behind. Her eyes opened barely, dark, terrified, lost. Boone dropped to one knee, lowering her gently into the dust. He poured water from his canteen and dabbed her lips with a cloth. "Easy now," he murmured. "You're safe. At least for the moment." She blinked, once, then again, still silent. Her hand trembled, reached for his sleeve, clutched it. Boone looked back at the sign, then at her, then at the sky. He pulled off his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. "You got a name?" he asked gently. "Nothing. Just breath." "Well," he sighed, "I reckon we'll find one." He lifted her again, careful with her weight, and stepped back toward the path, toward home. That's how Boone Thatch walked back into the wild with a girl marked for death in his arms, and a storm already brewing behind them. By the time Boone crested the final ridge, the sun had turned bronze, low and mean on the horizon. His ranch squatted below like a memory refusing to fade. Just a one-room shack and a sagging barn at the edge of nowhere. A crooked windmill turned slow against the sky, creaking in the breeze like it too remembered things best left forgotten. He rode in without fanfare, dust rising behind him. She never stirred again during the ride. Her head rested against his chest, breath faint, her skin hotter than the desert itself. Boone eased her from the saddle and carried her inside. The room was small but clean. A cot in one corner, shelves of supplies, a lantern flickering weak light against timber walls patched with tin. He laid her gently down, pulled off her boots, what was left of them, and wrapped her in a blanket. Her skin was torn and bruised, her wrists angry with welts. One ankle was swollen, purple rising beneath the dust. Still, she didn't speak, didn't scream, didn't cry, just stared through him like he was the last thing she expected, and wasn't sure she trusted it. Boone poured water into a metal basin and fetched a clean cloth. He knelt by her side, dipped the cloth, wrung it out slow. "I ain't gonna hurt you," he said, not to convince her, but maybe to remind himself. He took her right foot, carefully, respectfully, and lowered it into the basin. She flinched, barely, but didn't pull away. The water turned murky as he washed away the blood and sand. He moved slow, precise, like handling something sacred. She watched him from the corner of her eye. Her lips parted once, like she might speak, but no sound came. "Reckon you ain't much for talking," he said quietly. "That's all right. Silence don't lie, least not like people do." He wrapped her feet in strips of soft cloth and lifted them onto a folded blanket. Then he looked at her again, really looked. She was young, no more than 18. Cheekbones sharp, lashes thick with dust. Her face carried something ancient though, an ache that came from surviving more than one kind of death. "You remind me of a river I camped by once," he muttered. "Ran dry most years, dead looking, but after the rains, it rushed wild and deep." He hesitated, then added, "Locals called it Quiet Snake. Don't know why, just did." He paused. "I'll call you Naeli, just for now. You look like a Naeli." She didn't nod, didn't flinch, just breathed. That was enough. Boone pulled a wool blanket over her shoulders, tucked it in. "If you're hungry, there's beans. Not much, but better than air." No reply. He stood slowly, took his bedroll and dragged it toward the door. He'd sleep in the barn that night. Give her space. Give her dignity. Because whatever had been done to her, it wasn't right for her to be watched by another man's eyes, no matter how kind his intentions. Before stepping outside, he glanced back one more time. She had turned slightly, eyes closed. Her chest rose and fell, slow and steady now. The basin of water still sat beside the cot, stained red and brown, the color of pain scrubbed off skin but not yet out of memory. Boone picked it up, stepped outside, and poured it onto the thirsty ground. It soaked in quick, disappearing into the dust. Inside, she dreamed of ropes, of fire, of hands rough, yes, but gentle this time. Hands that asked for nothing, and gave her back her name even if it wasn't hers yet. Days passed, slow like molasses poured in the cold. The rhythm of the desert returned. Sun up, sun down, dust and wind. But inside Boone Thatch's little cabin, something had shifted. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was watchful. Naeli, as he still called her, moved like a creature half wild, half healed. She ate sparingly, slept in fits, always wrapped in that old coat of his, like it was armor. She never spoke, not a word, but Boone caught her watching him sometimes, when she thought he wouldn't notice. Eyes dark, curious, unreadable. She didn't trust him, not fully, but something softer had crept in. A truce, maybe even a flicker of peace. At night, Boone slept out by the barn, rifle within reach. Said it was for space, but that wasn't the truth. He was afraid of what her presence meant, of what it might drag out of the world, of who might come looking for her, because he hadn't forgotten the sign nailed above her head. White men don't forgive. Someone had written that with fury. Someone had meant for her to die slow and loud, and someone might still be watching. Then, on the third morning, Boone saw it. A boot print, fresh, pressed into the hard-packed dirt near the barn. Not his. Smaller, sharper, military-issue cavalry. Boone squatted beside it, jaw tight, fingers brushing the edge of the tread. It hadn't been there the night before. It was no more than a few hours old. He straightened. I scanned the ridge. Nothing but sagebrush and heat shimmer. Still, he felt it, that old itch between the shoulders, like a rifle aimed from somewhere he couldn't see. He walked back inside, slower than usual. Nayeli was seated by the window, wrapped in his coat, staring at nothing. "You seen anyone?" he asked gently. She didn't answer, just pulled the coat tighter around her frame. Boone didn't press her. He just murmured, "I think we've got company." That night, he sat on the porch, lantern turned low, rifle across his knees. The wind had died down, and the desert held its breath. Somewhere far off, a coyote cried. He heard her pacing inside, soft steps across the plank floor. She was worried too. By midday the next day, the rider came. Dust curled up behind a chestnut horse. Atop it sat a man in blue and gold. A U.S. cavalry uniform faded by sun and use. Rifle holstered, hat low, jaw shadowed with stubble. Boone stepped off the porch slow, casual, one hand resting near his belt. The soldier reined in, squinting down. "You Boone Thatch?" the man asked. "Depends who's asking." "Lieutenant Graham, Dust Hollow Station. We're tracking a fugitive." He pulled a folded notice from his pocket and handed it down. "You seen this girl?" Boone took it. He already knew what he'd see. A crude sketch, long hair, fierce eyes. Younger than she looked when he found her. The name didn't matter. The reward did. Wanted for murder and escape. Dangerous. $500 reward. Boone folded the paper slow. "Can't say I have. She's small. Might be hurt. Might be hiding. We think someone helped her near the Cottonwood Flats." Boone met the soldier's gaze. Didn't blink. "Ain't seen nothing but jackrabbits and a cow with more attitude than sense." Lieutenant Graham's eyes narrowed. "She's not just some runaway. She's Apache. Part of a violent group. That sign they left, they meant it." Boone's jaw ticked. "If I see anything," he said evenly, "I'll send word." The soldier studied him a beat longer, then nodded once, tugged his reins, and turned his horse around. Boone watched him ride off until the dust swallowed him. Inside, Nayeli stood just behind the curtain. She had heard everything. He stepped in, took off his hat, leaned it against the doorframe. "They came looking," he said. "Showed me a paper. Said you were wanted." She didn't speak, just watched him, rigid, ready to run. "I told him no." Her eyes narrowed. "I don't know what you did," Boone said quietly. "And maybe someday you'll tell me. But out here, a man makes choices. I made mine." He turned toward the stove, stirred the same pot of beans he'd stirred an hour ago. Behind him, she moved. Just a small shift, a breath. But in that tiny motion, trust cracked the silence and began to take root. That afternoon, the sun hung low, casting long, crooked shadows across the yard. The heat had broken, but the stillness that followed felt unnatural, like the earth itself was waiting. Boone sat on the porch, sharpening his knife with slow, deliberate strokes, steel on stone, over and over, not because it needed it, but because the rhythm gave his thoughts something to hold. He was thinking of her, always of her. Inside, she hadn't spoken, hadn't stirred much, but he felt her presence behind the thin plank walls like a heartbeat he didn't understand. Then, the crunch of footsteps. Not his, not a horse. Lighter, human. He looked up, She was outside. For the first time since he'd brought her home, Nayeli stepped beyond the doorframe on her own. The worn blanket still clung to her shoulders, sleeves rolled, the hem trailing behind her like a second skin. She walked slow, uneven, but forward. Boone didn't move, didn't dare. She crossed the yard like someone stepping into memory, unsure whether it would welcome or betray her. Then she knelt, just beyond the barn, in a patch of sun-cleared dirt. She dropped to her knees. Her fingers, delicate but sure, picked up a stick, and she began to draw. Boone rose, quiet as he could, and walked over. He stopped a few paces behind her, watching. She was carving something into the earth. A bird, wings wide, mid-flight, but not free. It was surrounded by flames, drawn sharp with tension in every line. The bird looked alive and in pain, lifting, burning, rising. Boone had seen battle tattoos, emblems on flags, scars turned into symbols. But this was something older. A cry, a memory, a warning. He knelt beside her, voice low and careful. "What is it?" For a long time she didn't speak. Then her voice cracked through the quiet, dry as the riverbed in summer. "Bird in fire," she said. "My people's sign." Her eyes stayed on the drawing. Her hand trembled, but she kept tracing. "This was my father's," she continued. "Our family's, painted on tents, carved into trees, always flying, always fire." Boone didn't interrupt. She tapped the bird's chest with the stick. "They came, soldiers, white coats, said we had to move, far, dry land, no food, no water, said we were danger." She stopped. Her jaw tightened. Her breath hitched. "We said no. We stayed. We fought." Her voice thinned. "They burned us." Her eyes stared past the flames she'd drawn. Somewhere farther. "They killed my mother, my brothers, burned the elders in their tents." Boone's fists curled slowly, his breath shallow. "I ran. I hid. They found me, beat me, said I stole a rifle. I didn't." Then, for the first time, she turned to him. Her voice, when it came again, was pure fire. "I did not steal. I did not kill. I did nothing wrong." The air held its breath. Boone didn't speak right away. When he did, his voice was a whisper wrapped in gravel. "I believe you." She dropped the stick. Her hands fell into her lap. Then her shoulders began to shake. Not loud, not violent, just unraveling. And then the sobs came. She folded in on herself, arms wrapped around her knees. The sound that escaped her was not just grief. It was history, breaking through skin. Boone stayed beside her. He didn't touch her, didn't shush her. He didn't offer comfort that might dishonor what she was losing. Instead, he reached down and pressed his palm into the earth, beside the bird in flames. Not touch, not pity, testimony. She felt it. Eventually, her breathing slowed. She raised her head, streaked with tears and dust, and looked at him, unshielded. "You can call me Nayeli," she whispered. He nodded. A slow, heavy motion, like something sacred had passed between them. "Nayeli it is," he said. They sat there together, quiet as the sun slipped behind the ridge. The firebird etched in the dust glowed orange in the last light, its wings frozen mid-struggle. But it wasn't finished. Not yet. That night, the desert wind returned, sighing through the rafters like it remembered something it didn't want to say aloud. Inside the cabin, a fire burned low. Boone sat beside it, boots off, sleeves rolled, tending to a kettle of beans that didn't need tending. His mind wasn't on supper. Behind him, Nayeli stood at the window, arms folded around herself. Her eyes weren't focused on anything, just drifting with the night. The silence between them had changed. It wasn't cold anymore. It had weight. Then her voice came, so soft it might have been part of the wind. "You want to know the truth?" Boone didn't turn around at first. He just set the spoon down slow and waited. Then he nodded once, deliberate. She walked across the room, each step sure, but cautious. She sat across from him at the table, the same spot where they'd first shared warmth that wasn't just from the fire. Her hands lay still in her lap. Her voice was steady, but each word carried the weight of a life folded in silence for too long. "My father was a minor chief. Our band was small, peaceful. We traded with settlers, learned their god. We followed rules, wanted to live." Boone didn't interrupt. He didn't blink. She went on. "A white woman was found dead near our grounds, throat cut. Her husband blamed us." Her hands tightened. "But it wasn't us. Everyone knew. He killed her. But they needed someone to blame." She paused, her voice thinner now. "Soldiers came, ranchers too. Town men with fire in their blood and crosses on their belts. They said it was justice." She swallowed hard. "It didn't help. They burned our camp, shot my brothers while they slept. My mother died clutching the beads a priest gave her. They hung my father from our council pole." Boone lowered his eyes. "They found me hiding in a hollow tree," she whispered. "Took my knife, beat me, called me savage, said I was dangerous. Then they hung me from that tree." Her voice cracked. "To bait the rest of us, the ones who survived." And then she asked quietly, "Why did you cut me down?" Boone didn't answer right away. The fire popped. Outside, something small scurried across gravel. Then he said it. "Because once, I didn't." She blinked, confused. Boone's eyes didn't leave the fire. "Last spring, raiders hit my ranch. Apache, they said. Maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't. I was out hunting. Came back to fire. Smoke. Ash." He paused. "My sister was 16. I heard her crying in the barn. But I was scared. I waited. I didn't go in." His voice had no edge, only regret. "She died before help came." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was thick, full of ghosts. Then she whispered, "You saved me because you couldn't save her." He nodded once. No denial. She studied him then, her voice small but pointed. "If I had been white, would you still have cut me down?" Boone stood slowly, walked around the table until he was standing in front of her. She tilted her head up, searching his face. He reached down, careful, and gently lifted her chin. His hand was rough, his touch careful, like holding the edge of a memory too precious to press. And then he said it. "I don't love skin. I love what breathes under it." Her eyes welled, but no tears fell. She reached up, pressed her cheek into his palm. And then, quiet as dawn breaking, they leaned into each other. The kiss was unsure at first. Not urgent, not bold. Just two people who'd forgotten what it felt like to be seen, and were remembering together. Her hands trembled on his chest. His arms wrapped slowly around her back. The fire flickered behind them. Later, they stood in the narrow kitchen, candlelight licking at the old wooden beams. Their shadows danced together across the far wall, like they had always known the steps. Outside, the desert wind calmed. Inside, something long buried began to mend. The next morning brought no wind, just a strange, unnatural stillness, like the desert had decided to hold its breath. Boone rose before the sun. Something in his bones felt tight, restless. He packed biscuits, jerky, and a canteen into the saddlebag like a man who didn't know when or if he'd return. Smoke drifted on the southern horizon, thin, steady, too straight to be a campfire. Word had spread. They were out of time. Nayeli stood by the fence line, wrapped in the old coat she'd worn the night before. Her hair was braided back, her face calm, but her eyes held questions that didn't need asking. Boone tightened the final strap on his saddle. His voice came low but certain. "We have to go. Tonight." She nodded, already knowing. He looked south. The land was rough, broken, unfamiliar. But beyond that, there was something else. A rumor, a promise. "There's land past the border. Sierra Madres. They say Apaches still live free out there. No soldiers. No signs." He paused, then added, softer this time, "We can make it if we ride hard." She stepped closer, close enough he could feel the warmth of her breath. Her hand reached for his, wrapped it tight. Then she spoke, patchy, slow, but full of meaning. "I want to live. I want to live as your wife." Boone's chest rose once, then again. He closed his eyes, pressed his forehead to hers. That one sentence carried more than 1,000 promises. By sundown, they were ready. 2 horses, 2 souls, 1 plan. No note, no fire, no goodbye. Just a quiet door left swinging and a home turned to memory. They rode under cover of night. Stars scattered above them like dust across velvet. Moonlight spilled over the ridges, silvering the rocks and mesquite. Nayeli leaned forward on her horse, her frame steady, practiced now. She didn't ask what lay ahead. She didn't need to. Boone rode beside her, eyes scanning every ridge, every shadow. His gut knotted tight. Then the shot came. A crack tore through the night. Boone jerked in the saddle, then slid sideways, hard into the dirt. "Boone!" Nayeli screamed, leaping down. He clutched his side, blood already soaking his shirt. "Keep going," he rasped, barely above a whisper. "No!" Another shot whistled past, striking rock behind them. From the ridgeline, 2 riders emerged, silhouettes in moonlight, rifles raised. Boone groaned, forcing himself up. "We have to move." Nayeli hooked her arm under his, dragging him forward. "Believe me," he gritted, "I won't die lying down." They stumbled toward a narrow pass between 2 cliffs, hidden, shielded, a place only locals would know. Bullets cut through the night air, but the rocks offered cover. The riders wouldn't follow in tight quarters. Inside the pass, Boone collapsed to his knees. Blood spilled onto the dust. He looked up at her, pain dulling his features, but not his voice. "You said you wanted to be my wife." She knelt, cupping his face. "I meant it." He gave her a broken smile, lips cracking. "Then we better make it through this pass." She nodded, eyes wet but unafraid. And for the first time since he cut her down from that tree, Nayeli prayed. Not to the settler's God, not to names written in hymn books, but to the spirits of fire, wind, and survival. Because love in this land was never simple. It was a gamble, and tonight they were betting everything. The river whispered low in the night, brushing gently over smooth stones, its voice steady and ageless. Inside the canvas-wrapped shelter near its bend, the air was thick with wood smoke, sage, and healing. Boone lay propped on folded blankets, a wet cloth draped over his brow. His breath, once ragged, had softened to something steady, fragile but holding. Beside him, Nayeli sat cross-legged, the basin at her side, wringing out the cloth again and again in slow, practiced motions. Her fingers worked with care, the kind born of grief and love braided tightly together. Boone's eyes fluttered open, half-lidded, distant, but they found her. A crooked smile tugged at the corner of his lips. "You always this bossy with your patience?" he murmured, voice barely louder than the fire's hiss. She raised a brow, her mouth twitching with the smallest smile. Only the ones too stubborn to die. He chuckled, winced. She reached across, her palm pressed lightly to his chest to still him. The silence that settled between them wasn't empty, pulsed like breath, full, quiet, deep. Then he whispered, "Tell me something true." His voice had no weight, no demand, just a wish hanging in the still air. She paused, hand resting over his heart. And then, slow as dawn rising behind canyon walls, she reached for his hand, guided it gently toward her chest, just above her heart, and held it there. Her voice came soft and clear. "Ayana," she said, "it means peaceful river. My father gave it to me." Boone closed his eyes for a beat, let the name settle on his chest like a sacred thing. When he opened them again, his gaze was steady. "Ayana," he repeated, tasting it like prayer. "You're the only peace I've ever known." She didn't cry, not this time. She just curled her fingers around his and held them tight. Outside, the river kept flowing, unbothered by time, unshaken by blood, as if it had known all along that some stories, no matter how broken, could still find a way to mend. Time passed, not with urgency, but with the slow, deliberate rhythm of the land. Months melted into each other like wax in the heat, and on the southern edge of the old territory, where borders blurred into scrub and mesquite, where the wind stopped carrying names, Boone and Ayana found a place that didn't ask for history, just breath, just now. Their home sat near a bend in the river. Nothing grand, just pine, hide, and love hammered into every beam. No locks, no portraits, only herbs hanging from the rafters, 2 worn books, and a baby blanket half-finished, waiting on the windowsill. Boone rose with the sun most days, trained a stubborn young Mustang in the clearing, his voice calm, his hands patient. Ayana hummed as she worked, sewing a tiny shirt now, her belly round beneath her woven sash. She moved with grace and certainty, like the spirit of the house itself. He watched her sometimes from across the garden, just watched, as if looking too long might make the moment vanish. She looked up once, caught him, and smiled, and he swore the desert bloomed. One evening, she walked barefoot down the familiar path to the water's edge. The river moved slow, but strong. She stepped into the shallows, let the cool swirl around her ankles, laid both hands over her belly. Her voice was soft, barely more than a breeze. "Little one," she whispered, "your father, he didn't just forgive, he loved, and he kept his promise." Behind her, boots rustled through grass. Boone joined her, quiet as dusk. He stood beside her and took her hand without a word. They watched the river together, watched stars wake above the trees, watched the water curl around stones that had stood through centuries of storms. No one had expected them to survive. Not the hanging, not the bullets, not the history, but they had. 2 souls once marked for death, now holding life beneath the silver sky. There would be no statue, no song, just a quiet place where peace finally came, and a river that remembered everything.